Dricus Du Plessis defeats Strickland by unanimous decision 50-45 and 149-46. Dricus, fighting as he usually does, throwing out a tornado of random techniques, then they happen to land, and outstriking yet another middleweight striker is crazy. He outstruck Strickland, Israel Adesanya, and Robert Whittaker while looking at the ground when he's throwing overhands, while lifting his chin up when he's throwing punches, and he has like the most unorthodox technique we've ever seen out of any fighter. It's almost like Dricus' fighting style is just effective. He's well-rounded, he has a lot of punching power, he's very tough, he has a great chin, and I think the most impressive thing about Dricus is his cardio. This guy could be exploding in the most random techniques for 5 rounds straight. Every strike he throws is with all of his power, and he doesn't gas out at all. Before the nose surgery, which was before he fought Whittaker, he used to gas out in the 3rd round, but it really was because he couldn't breathe. After the nose surgery, this guy could fight 5 rounds easily. He doesn't even slow down at all. It's absolutely crazy. He's throwing spinning back kicks, spinning back fists, lunging overhands, jumping across the cage, missing a lot of his punches too, which gasses you out even more, but it does nothing to Dricus. But this time he didn't need to attempt as many takedowns, but this time he didn't need as much wrestling to beat Strickland. And Strickland was more defensive this time than he was the first fight. It seemed like he was throwing a lot more punches, which is also why he bruised and swelled up Dricus' eye, but this time he was a lot more defensive. And eventually, if you stay defensive against Dricus, those power punches are going to get through. He landed the overhand on the nose of Strickland, breaking Strickland's nose, and then after the broken nose, Strickland was putting it back in place in the middle of a fight against a guy who's button mashing in front of him, which just shows how tough Strickland is. But he was also partially landing the question mark kicks to the head, landing with his foot, not necessarily the shin. And Strickland's corner just kept telling him, you gotta throw more. You have to throw more. And Strickland just wasn't doing it until like the end of the fight. And Dricus didn't even attempt as many takedowns to offset Strickland's offense. Almost the entire fight was striking. It's another go in for Dricus Du Plessis. And I'm guessing he's gonna fight Hamza Chimaev. Hamza didn't think this fight was exciting, and maybe he can bring order to this weight class, and we'll see how that fight goes. That should be the next fight for Dricus against Hamza Chimaev, and as for Strickland, maybe a rematch with Nasruddin Imavov. We know Imavov wants that fight, and if Hamza is getting the title shot, then in the meantime, they could do the rematch between Strickland and Imavov, so those would be great fights as well. And Zhang Weili dominating Tatiana Suarez. She might be the best fighter in women's MMA ever. The most skilled fighter at least, right? Who is as well-rounded as Zhang Weili? She out-wrestled. Technically, you can say she out-wrestled Tatiana Suarez, who's arguably the best wrestler in women's MMA. They both got 1 takedown against each other, and Weili defended 14 out of 15 takedowns. That is absolutely insane. And also had longer top control than Tatiana. The striking is very one-sided. Zhang Weili even stunned her with a right hand from distance. And there were a few takedowns, I believe in the 4th and 5th rounds, where Tatiana timed the perfect counter takedown. She got under Zhang Weili's punch when she overextended as well, making it easier for her to get taken down. And she still defended Tatiana's takedowns. That is absolutely crazy. The fight you have to make next is Valentina Shevchenko, who is the most skilled female fighter of all time. Because I do believe Valentina and Weili are the most skilled ever. There is Amanda Nunes, but Nunes has the punching power and the athleticism and all that sort of stuff. I think in technique, it's between Weili and Shevchenko, and arguably, Shevchenko beat Amanda Nunes when they had that rematch, and Shevchenko was much smaller than Nunes in that fight. That's the fight they have to do next. And credit to Tatiana Suarez. She is tough. She constantly went for the takedown, the thing that she does best. The commentators are saying that Suarez should be swinging for the fences and try to get the knockout, which I agree, but at the same time, it's just not who she is. She never really had punching power like that. She's not fast. She doesn't have good striking technique. She's not a striker, right? She doesn't have the technique, the power, the speed, or any of that stuff. It's going to be very hard for her to get the knockout by swinging like that, but she at least tried to get the takedown the whole fight. She had that nasty gash on her knee, and apparently she fell against the fence and cut her knee at the base. But regardless, man, Zhang Weili just defeated arguably the 2nd best strawweight in the world and made it look easy. Who beats Zhang Weili in her weight class? I mean, the number 1 contender is Tatiana. Number 2 is the Yang Xiaonan, and she beat her as well. She beat Jessica Andrade, who was number 4. She beat Amanda Lemos, who was number 5. No one else after that makes sense. So I guess if she fights in strawweight again, it's going to have to be against Verna Jandiroba, and she's going to dominate that fight as well. It's crazy also that Tatiana was the favorite. I mentioned in the prediction video, it was surprising. I mean, she's the contender fighting a dominant strawweight champion who's more well-rounded, has fought 5 rounds many times, is way more active as a fighter, has been taking fights a lot more than Suarez has. Suarez has been injured for a lot of her career, you know, it's hindered her prime, and she's never been 5 rounds before. Suarez has never fought into the 4th and 5th rounds in her entire career, and she slowed down in the 3rd round before, you know. The 1st round, we knew that at least one of the takedowns takedowns was going to land for Suarez, and it did. She controlled most of the round and won by 10-9. But then she started to slow down, and Weili was more dominant with every round moving forward. The championship experience, going to the 5th round as many times as she has, while also being more well-rounded. I don't know how they thought that Suarez would be the favorite going into this fight. And it's great that a lot of people won a lot of money betting on Zhang Weili. But for her next fight, I want to see her fight the winner of Valentina Shevchenko and Menafura. And the thing is, Zhang Weili usually fights like once a year, so I think she would wait. And she gets better during that layoff, so I think she's going to wait for the winner of Shevchenko and Fura. I don't know who's going to win that fight. I would think Shevchenko, just because of how good she looked against Alexa Grasso in her last one. And that fight is arguably the greatest female fight of all time. It might even beat Amanda Nunes versus Chris Cyborg, which I still hold is like the most prestigious female fight of all time. Or Nunes versus Shevchenko, right? But this is prime versus prime. Zhang Weili moving up to the flyweight division. I believe she's almost the same size as Shevchenko. Maybe there's like a 5-pound difference at most. Going up against Valentina Shevchenko, in my opinion, is the best women's MMA fight of all time, where it's going to be entirely relied on who is the more skilled fighter. Whereas when Shevchenko fought Nunes was like 15 to 20 pounds heavier than Shevchenko, right? Shevchenko walks around 135 pounds. Nunes most likely walks around in 150 to 155, I would guess. Weili and Shevchenko might have a 5-pound difference, but if Weili wants to fight a strawweight again, I guess it would be against Jan Jaroba, right? And if she beats Jan Jaroba, there is no one left in that weight class. And as for Tatiana Suarez, maybe she could fight Yang Xiaonan, the #1 contender versus the #2 contender. Taliesin Teixeira annihilates Justin Tafa in 35 seconds. TKOs him with a knee to the body, then elbow up top. He knew that Tafa would lower his hands after the knee to the body. It looked like he may have broke his nose with the elbow too, but you do see him grimace from the body shot. Going from body to head is always a great combination, but this time with a knee to an elbow. This guy's huge for the weight class. 6'7", enormous reach, one-shot knockout power. Went for the takedown initially too. He said that he knew that Tafa would defend the takedown, but eventually he would drop his hands. And I think the knee to the body discouraged Tafa from lifting his hands up. An amazing UFC debut from Taliesin Teixeira. Then there was a draw between Jimmy Crute and Adolfo Bellato. I thought it was either a draw or Jimmy Crute won because the first round was an absolute 10-8, right? He nearly finished him. He had top control for most of that round as Bellato took himself to the ground. Jimmy Crute landing elbows on top. Then when he stood up, he landed a punch combination, rocked him with the right overhand. Through the guard too. Bellato did a good job of covering up, blocking against the punch, but that was 4 ounces right there. It wasn't necessarily Bellato not having good technique. It was just that the 4-ounce gloves got right through the guard, dropped him. Jimmy Crute almost finished the fight. Then Jimmy Crute started to slow down in the second round. He gassed out in the third. He still was landing good punches, but Bellato was landing a lot of good calf kicks. 1-2 combos. Both fighters showed good heart, and Jake Matthews defeating Francisco Prado by unanimous decision, 30-27. His boxing looked great, man. Good dirty boxing, punches in the pocket, landing uppercuts throughout the whole fight, and Francisco Prado did have the takedown in the first round, but he was mostly just like outskilled, especially in the striking, which was very impressive from Jake Matthews. He's not usually the best striker or anything like that, who has very good grappling, but this one, all he needed was a striking. Going to the well, rinse and repeat with the uppercuts, landing body shots as well, which lowers the hands for the uppercuts later in the fight. And Francisco Prado was trying to land the 1-2. He was more composed with the punches he was throwing compared to when he fought like Daniel Zellhuber, for an example, right? He was way more wild, throwing haymakers and hooks in that fight, but here he was more composed with the punches. But at the end of the day, Jake Matthews is just the better striker of the two. He was much bigger, more technical, seemed to be about the same speed, which is not a great thing for a fighter coming up to the welterweight division, that he's still the same speed as the bigger fighter. Usually that's going to have the bigger fighter winning the fight. Just that alone. But great win for Jake Matthews. The Gabriel Santos and Jack Jenkins fight was insane. Jenkins drops him with a high kick, as Santos didn't bring his hands up high enough to guard against it. His hands were lower, the kick came above his hands. It grazed one of them, but then landed to the head, dropping him. And right away Santos recovered, secured the triangle choke, and I thought the fight was going to be over. It was all the way sunk in. Somehow Jenkins was able to angle himself slightly enough to give himself some air. Then in the second round, Gabriel Santos landing counter punches, right hook into left straights, landing his own kicks, taking the fight to the ground, landing ground and pound shots. Now the referee was telling him, stay busy, like he was giving him a warning that he was going to stand them up, which is ridiculous, completely ridiculous. What does he mean he's going to stand them up? The guy's landing ground and pound shots. He's not stalling. Santos landing ground and pound. He was landing body shots, elbows. It wasn't like he was doing nothing. Even though Jenkins, defensively, he was doing what he was supposed to do, stomped the ground and pound. That was so silly. Then in the third round, Santos switches, shifts his stance from southpaw to orthodox, throws the front kick with his power leg, up the center, stuns Jack Jenkins. He was still able to keep himself standing. What a heart from Jack Jenkins, man. But Santos got his back and was trying to get the choke, but Jenkins doing a very good job of hand fighting, stopping the choke. So Santos used the half Nelson on his back, breaking his posture down with that half Nelson. Jenkins drops to the ground, and then there was a rear naked choke, and the fight was over. Excellent win for Gabriel Santos, and great effort from Jack Jenkins, man. Showing a lot of heart, dropping Santos. He's a big underdog going to the fight. Tom Nolan and Slava Claus had an excellent fight where Nolan won the fight by a unanimous decision, 229-28, 130-27. He mixed it up with his striking and grappling, giving such an advantage in the fight, whereas Slava Claus was merely just striking, except for the third round where he got on top trying like ground and pound, but he was losing the ground and pound exchange. Tom Nolan was out striking him off of his back, caught him at the top of the head with elbows, and Slava really couldn't get much off with his top position. The striking exchanges on the feet were excellent though. Tom Nolan using his reach to great extent, and in close range, landing the counter elbow on the back foot, retracting for the elbows after the initial spin, and he knows that Slava Claus was constantly moving his head to the right because he tried to get his head on the outside of the left tray of Nolan. And then Nolan started following up with head kicks on that left side, intercepting the head movement. I believe one time he even threw a left straight, then left high kick behind it. Same side combination, and nearly landed a flush martello dead negativa, and in English it's called the hammer of denial kick. I wish there was a shorter name for it, maybe just hammer kick would be great. But it was while he was on the ground on his back, he pulsed it on the ground with one of his hands, kind of handstanding and throwing a round kick upward. Very tricky kick that requires a lot of energy to throw, but it's extremely powerful. In the first round, the Darce choke was close. He tried to combo that into a guillotine, but credit to Slava Claus because he had great submission defense. He landed good body shots, straight rights to the body, turning side kicks to the body. Just an excellent fight from beginning to end. And then Wong Tong easily defeats Bruno Brazil by unanimous decision, 30-27, and just completely outstruck her from beginning to end. It was a one-sided striking match essentially, and then Wong got a takedown at the end of the third round. I was thinking, when is Bruno Brazil at least going to change up her game plan here and try to take the fight to the ground, which I thought would have been the initial game plan, but she didn't attempt a single takedown. Wong did. The fight was a mismatch. And Brazil didn't do much throughout the fight. She didn't throw many strikes. After the first round, was mostly defensive, sitting back, sometimes looking for the perfect punch or kick to knock out Wong, but Wong was a lot more defensively responsible than she was in her last fight. And I think that's why Wong wasn't trying to finish the fight, get super aggressive, is because she got dropped and finished against an opponent in her last fight that she was supposed to walk right through. So she wanted to be a lot more fundamental here and patient. Winning by decision, that's fine with her. You know, just get the win. Don't get finished like last time. She had excellent side kicks, great leg kicks. Even though Brazil was landing good calf kicks in the first round, she went away from that. Even though Wong wasn't pressuring her back the entire fight, right? There were a lot of opportunities for Brazil to throw more calf kicks, but she just wasn't. She was kind of just sitting there. It looked like she honestly was waiting for the fight to finish. She had no urgency to win. Get the knockout, go for takedown, something. Like you would expect her to at least switch it up and go for a takedown. But the fact that she didn't, I knew Wong was going to win the fight. And smiling after the fight too, she was like, good win for Wong. She's an excellent striker and very easy win for her. Alexandra Topuria defeats Colby Thickness by unanimous decision, 29-28. It was a closer fight than it needed to be. I thought Topuria was obviously the better fighter. He had the better boxing, he had the leg kicks, the few leg kicks that he threw damaging Colby's stance. Defended all the takedowns, got good top position, rocked him in the first round, slammed him with a suplex. I think he's missing that aggression that Ilia Topuria has. If he's a lot more aggressive with his offense, I think he could have won the fight a lot earlier. Probably finish him in the second or third rounds, because there were many opportunities for him to kick out the legs or even unload with more power punches when Colby was up against the fence. But many times he just allowed Colby to move around and didn't really establish much offense. And in the third round, Colby landed an overhand that stumbled Topuria backwards. But then again, we have to remember that both fighters are making their UFC debut. That was Topuria's 7th professional fight. So he's going to make mistakes like that. He's probably not going to fight the perfect fight, especially with a short notice opponent. So I think he has the potential and the talent to be a very good bantamweight in the future. He hits very hard. He has great boxing skills, better boxing skills than a lot of the guys in the bantamweight division right now. He has excellent takedown defense, very good grappling, excellent leg kicks. That one spinning kick that he threw, the wheel kick that got so close to landing on Colby. We don't see that kind of stuff out of Ilia, right? Ilia doesn't throw any head kicks. I believe Ilia has not thrown a single head kick in his entire UFC career so far. Alexander threw a wheel kick very quickly, excellent for him too. Like that was an impressive kick that he threw. I thought this guy's just going to be a boxer, right? I didn't think he was going to even throw the few amount of kicks that he did. I think the fight would have been a lot more dominant if he threw out more leg kicks, unloaded with more punching combinations, as Colby was up against the fence, just like Ilia would do, right? With Ilia Topuria, if you're in the pocket with him, he is going to knock you out or drop you many times like he did against Josh Emmett. With Alexander, that killer instinct, like that offensive aggression was the one thing that he was missing in this fight from making it a flawless performance. The fact that he wasn't as offensive allowed Colby to stay in the fight a lot longer. So he had a great chin too. The time that Alexander landed the overhand and rocked Colby, he actually got countered by a right hand. Colby landed a right hand right off the top of the side of the head and did nothing to Alexander. It was like throwing a pebble at a building. It just didn't do a thing. He punched right through it and landed the overhand. He had great body shots, and against fighters who move around that much, leg kicks are always going to be such a big weapon against system, shown against Dominic Cruz in his prime, who retired yesterday, right? The bantamweight GOAT, advanced the footwork technique of the entire MMA landscape, but even against a fighter with such great footwork like Dominic Cruz, leg kicks are always going to be a major counter to his style. Same thing against Colby Thickness. He's moving around a lot. Didn't really have any defense to the leg kicks at all, but Alexander only threw a few. So I thought it was a good win for Alexander Taborya. I think the skills that he displayed were enough to show everybody that he has a lot of potential. It was his UFC debut. I think he can go far in the bantamweight division. He needs to get more aggressive with his offensive skills. And Rong Zhu defeats Cody Steele by decision. What a scrap that was, man. Rong Zhu showed to be the better striker of the two. Way more technical, even in the brawling that they had. Cody Steele was swingy for the fences, not as much technique, whereas Rong Zhu stayed composed in many of those exchanges, landed better shots, dropped him with a jab at one point, rocked him with a left overhand, which was a wire shot, but stayed a lot more composed than Cody. Cody abandoned his wrestling. He's a grappler first, and he fell in love with his hands. He wanted to get the knockout, and I think when he rocked Rong Zhu in the first round, it may not have been a great thing for him because he believed he could knock out Rong Zhu, exchanging with him throughout the rest of the fight, when he could have just shot takedowns under those big punches of Rong Zhu instead of exchanging punches with him. There's many ways to wrestle, there's many ways to shoot a takedown, and he wasn't exploring the takedown options throughout the fight. He's a very good wrestler. Like, he's amazing on the ground. But to strike with Rong Zhu as much as he wasn't the smartest move, and I think his coaches are going to tell him after the fight, like, where was your wrestling? Where were your takedowns? Why are you swinging with this guy? But Rong Zhu kicking out the inside of the leg, landing a punching combination after, much better placement of his shots, and way better balance, and keeping his stance while he was throwing his punches for many of those exchanges, whereas Cody Steele was getting into the parallel stance throwing haymakers, or sometimes just getting completely off balance to try to get the knockout. It was an exciting fight, but man, I had much higher expectations out of Cody Steele. If he got into a fight like that, I expected him to be level changing under the punches and fighting as a mixed martial artist, not as a brawler. Because in the lightweight division, this was an exciting fight, but if he goes up against better fighters, he's not going to beat him that way. You know, can you imagine him fighting Drew Dober or Matt Frevola or Bobby Green? These guys will KO him fighting like that. And then Jonathan McKelliff defeats Kevin Jousset by unanimous decision, dropped him in the first round. He went to the leg kick first, then brought it up high, and landed many good body kicks throughout the fight, constantly circling out to his right side, lining up the left straight body kicks. A good performance from McKelliff. What about Quinlan Selkilde? Knocking out Anshul Jubli in 19 seconds. Right overhand floors him. It's like I said in my prediction video. Anshul Jubli is a good offensive fighter, but defensively he doesn't move his head, doesn't really pick up his hands that much, and Quinlan took advantage of that right at the beginning of the fight. Just launched a power punch, knocked him out. Now, there is a debate as to whether it was an early stoppage or not. Maybe the referee could have let the fight play out more, but he did hit the ground hard. He was going for a takedown. He didn't let go of it even after the referee told him that the fight was over, so he was most likely concussed. And I think that Quinlan, if he followed with ground and pound instead of the walk-off knockout, he would have finished the fight. But it was a great punch from Quinlan, man. What a shot. There's no better way of winning a fight than getting in there, ending the fight with one punch, going home with your show money, your win money, and potentially a performance bonus. This guy could fight again next few months if he wanted to. That is if he wasn't injured in the training camp. Amazing win by Quinlan, man.